Hey guys, how's it going? OSCO here, back with another video. Today I'm going to be showing you guys the new and updated version of Saturn 2. You will have seen me use this in a couple of different videos, mainly my how to make a bass out of anything. Basically, this is one of my favourite saturation units that is on the market, at least the version 1 was. I'm just going to break down all of the different updates, the new things that they've included, the minor things that people might look over which I think are extremely important, especially for someone in my case who masters a lot of people's music. I never used to use this for mastering, but now this is a totally viable tool for mastering and show you the reasons why. Let's get the other version of Saturn up as well so we can compare back and forth, because I think that'll be useful for people that might be using the old version and might want to, consider upgrading. This is the new one, this is the old one next to it. So within the old version, you had a high quality mode, which is basically like oversampling. So the high quality button controls the oversampling of the internal distortion algorithms. It'll run the plugin using twice as much CPU power, or however much. Selecting good mode is 8 times oversampling. Superb mode is 32 times oversampling. I'm not sure if that's a option within here. I think this has introduced more oversampling, I believe. I'm not really sure where to go into to choose the extra. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you just click on it and then you got good and superb. Whereas the high quality mode was just an on and off with this one. So I'm guessing it was just basic 4 times or 8 times, and then this is giving it 32 times. So oversampling can go even further. Now, oversampling, if you guys aren't aware, basically it runs the plugin at twice the amount of output. As you can see here, it basically gives a more detailed breakdown. So distortion processing introduced digital aliasing effects, especially when applying a lot of drive. Enabling high quality mode will drastically reduce the aliasing artifacts by oversampling. So if you guys have seen like breakdowns of Massive versus Serum, aliasing is like all this like low level noise or extra harmonics that you introduce which are undesirable. It's just digital distortion. Distortion in the music sense is basically adding harmonics, but then distortion in a technical term means a degradation of the audio signal. So this is like what it means by distortion, by digital aliasing. This is a distortion effect which is undesirable. If you can choose oversampling, choose it, like enable it if you can, if your computer can handle it, because it will make your sound better. It removes aliasing in this sense. So this is a really great feature, especially being able to introduce more of it. So basically in here you've got different types of saturation and distortion algorithms. So you've got your presets up here, but these aren't presets. These are more like different flavors of distortion. Now the best way to like demonstrate this is by introducing a sine wave. So if I turn off this, if I turn off all of them, that's a basic sine wave. What I'll do is I'll grab up a spectrum to sort of show what's going on here. So this is a basic sine, and operator has got some aliasing going on down in the upper end here, but it's at like negative 160 dB, so you can't hear it. It's practically inaudible at this point. Now, if we introduce Saturn 2, there's already a little bit of drive at 20%, so there's a couple of extra harmonics, some that are audible a little bit further up. So Saturn's doing something by default. I'm not quite sure what it's doing, but these are like tricks that plugin companies will do to sort of when you throw something on, it's like, oh, it sounds better, they'll add a little bit of drive to sort of indicate that something's happening. So let's dive into some of the new presets, because basically it's got version 1 presets. So all of these presets are the presets that can be found in this plugin here. And it's good that they've included all of these, because basically anyone that's like might be upgrading might want some of these old presets to work from. Like some of the basic saturator and the saturate and color ones were something that I gravitated towards quite soon on when I first downloaded Saturn, and I still use them every now and again just for gentle saturation. Obviously I'll dial back the mix a little bit. Yeah, so some of those are great, so it's great to have these included with the new high quality modes and stuff like that. Now, what makes this really interesting, because what makes Saturn a great plugin is basically you can introduce all of these different bands, and you can still do all the same with this one. But what you couldn't do with the old version is you couldn't change these slopes. Now, why would you want to change the slopes? So first of all, you'd want to change the slopes just to have a tighter control on the saturation in the band that you're working in, because when there's a crossover introduced, basically what's happening here is one band is like, is here, then another band is going the other way. So you've got this crossover thing here. So one is on the low end, one's on the high end. That's basically what's happening right here. Now, what the Q is doing is basically making it either a tighter slope, or a less steep slope. You can see with these little things in here. You can't really see it all that well. I might zoom in on the output just so you can see all the different slopes because it's quite small. But basically what's happening here is, if I make this bigger and close that down, basically the Q is just going from a less steep slope to a more steep slope, like that. And now you might be thinking, okay, cool, so I can get a tighter control on the distortion, so I can select it on a tighter band. And yeah, that's true. But what's great about this is because if you're not aware about EQs and things or filters, so if you have a steeper Q or a steeper steeper roll off, you're basically introducing more phasing issues at the point of that roll off. Now, the best way to describe this is by showing you Saturn's interface. It has a really cool way of showing you phase issues within the filter section. So if we grab, basically a low pass filter and turn this on and then click, you can see the phase relationship right here. So that's where the phase, that's right at the point of the cutoff, which is, round about here where the phasing occurs, is right where you're rolling things off. The steeper the curve, the more phasing issues occur, you see. So this is a 12 dB roll off, 18 dB roll off, 24 dB roll off, and so there's less phasing occurring at the point of roll off. The lower the lower the roll off is, so there's less phasing basically. Now this is great because within a crossover situation, especially where you're adding harmonics and stuff, you don't, and like if it's at a very specific frequency, like you're controlling a drum kit or you're saturating a drum kit and you want the kick to be one thing and one flavor of distortion, and then maybe the snare is another flavor of distortion. You don't want those crossover points to introduce too much phase. And going on to phase, which is why this is great for mastering engineers and why this is a viable option for your saturation now, is it adds this linear phase mode. So basically these crossover points, it'll introduce latency to try and mitigate those phasing issues. So on top of having low aliasing and these different roll-offs, you can also introduce a linear phase mode, which will try and it doesn't totally eliminate these phasing issues that you see here in Serum, but it does, it has a slightly more phase coherent approach to delivering the final result. So it is, it's a really good update, just for this feature alone. Let's give a listen to some of these presets compared to Saturn 1, because basically Saturn 1 had a bunch of these algorithms. So this is all you had to work with Saturn 1. You have clean tube, worn tube, broken tube, then tapes, amps, saturation, then smudge, rectify, and destroy. Now within here you've got 4 tubes, so they've added a subtle tube on top of all the others. For the tape, they've added a subtle tape. For amps, they've added a lot more amps, which is cool. There's some American, some British, crunchy, lead, screaming, whereas on here they just had lead and all that, so they didn't have the classic American or British sound. Then for saturation, subtle saturation, gentle saturation, heavy saturation. So they've just added some more subtle modes, and I think this is aiming towards more of the mastering end of things again. They're really trying to push this to be something that's viable for not only a mix tool but also for mastering. On top of all this, you've got all these extra added modes, which is fantastic. And you're thinking, okay, well, what's the point of giving it Saturn 2 just by giving it some new algorithms and some slopes and stuff? They've added all these modulation modes. So they've got a new slider, an XY controller, an XLFO, an envelope generator, envelope follower, and a MIDI source, which you can choose to be afterwheel, aftertouch, default, keyboard tracking, mod wheel, pitch bend, sustain pedal, velocity, volume control. That's sick. So basically it's as simple as clicking and dragging, just like a modular unit would be, and you assign the parameters to whatever you want. So let's say you have X going to the frequency crossover and then Y going to the drive on this band. So now basically what's going on is when I increase this up, the drive is going up, and then when I bring this left or right, it's moving the crossover. If I put this up a little bit more so it's a bit more drastic. And move this down maybe. And then maybe you could have an LFO on. So there's a few limited things on like where you can put it for probably coding reasons. Let's say we want an LFO on this. So now this is moving up the tone. And then maybe I want a specific envelope on maybe the dynamics. So what we'll do is we'll pull down the sustain, give it a real short sound. So we want the dynamics to be at this point, so we'll just go cool the dynamics control on here. So now obviously these aren't very exciting results because I'm just doing this on a sine wave, but say you're doing this on a something more complex, like for bass design and for the creative people that are doing electronic music and things like that. I wouldn't obviously I wouldn't say this is great for mastering purposes, but there's some really cool stuff on here, and this envelope follower is great because basically it will follow the sound and create a modulation value based on the sound that you're inputting in on it. So whatever you're doing with an envelope generator, an envelope follower would just follow the sound that you've already made. So let's say you have like this doing something for very specific. This envelope follower would follow the amp envelope of whatever your synth is or whatever audio signal you're feeding into it. You can offset those frequencies. You can, the LFOs. You can introduce more points. So more steps. So it becomes almost like Massive's Performer here, where you can create your own sort of unique wobbles in distortion and like this isn't just an LFO like say on the volume or on in this case it's on the tone. So you're modulating the timbre of the sound over time, and this is in certain DAWs and even in Ableton, you've got the Max for Live stuff, which could do something like this with the old version. And like Bitwig has its own like things where you can modulate sounds with its own built-in modulators. But like having it baked in here and with this like really cool like visual feedback, it's really nice. It's a welcome feature to be brought in, and this XY control is basically like a mod wheel but built in. So it's just a slider that's going to be affecting the sound. Now, let's listen to some of these sounds then, because I'm just going to crank this and maybe set this back to being normal. So the best way to like hear a distortion is to send a sine, a simple sine wave through it and then hear the characteristics of it. So basically a saturation unit is adding harmonics. Now, let's open this up. Let's make this a bit smaller so we can see what's going on here in the spectrum. So that's the sound of the warm tape, subtle tape. So yeah, super subtle. This is drivers at 100%, so off. You might want to be wearing headphones for this because it's very minute details that we're hearing here. But So in terms of all the subtle stuff, I'm guessing everything's going to sound the same from the clean tape to the other one. So it sounds identical. I'm going to get rid of the old Saturn now and just flick through some of these. Some of these amps sound great. Sorry about that. Just I love feedback. Sounds like there's some reverb on that one. What else have we got? Subtle saturation, transformer. That's pretty subtle. I don't think they had breakdown on Saturn 1. These are the more of like the creative sounds. And yeah, some of these sound really cool. Rectify just flattens everything out and removes the fundamental by the looks of it. That's more of like a squarey sort of sound, so it's every odd harmonic in the Destroy version. And yeah, and then you can obviously like shape all these sounds with the built-in bands here, and they're not specific to the bands that you put in. So like this is specific to each one. So like as you can see here, you know, you can have different tone controls per crossover, which is also in the old version. But let's listen to some of these new presets then. I think maybe we need to go to the drive settings, or because the color one's a bit, you know, super's a bit more subtle. Not super subtle, but they're more subtle. Drive will be a bit more in your face. So just having these like quick to reach features is just, it's just really nice. Just from a creative standpoint, just having these things here, you know, quickly going through and then just like be able to just, you know, automate all these different things or just quickly play about with things and get slightly different sounds. It's just really nice. This looks like it'll be great for sub-bass stuff. Maybe EQ out some of the stuff that's going in the high end, but yeah, these are all great. Basically, the major updates are these modulation features, and whenever a plugin company introduces more modulation, it's great for creative output. And as much as this update has mainly been towards people that care about the quality of the sound after the distortion that's occurring, you know, it's also a major update for people that want to be creative within the, you know, within the interface without having to think of like workarounds to wanting to modulate things. This is a really new and improved way of doing things, because what's great is the movement of these crossovers sounds fantastic compared to something like Trash, because if we get that up, another really popular saturation unit, so Trash is basically it's a very similar thing by Isotope, and if we run the same signal through it, you hear all that tearing. Like, you couldn't modulate these without it totally fucking up your sound. Whereas this one here, you know, it's almost built in. Like, these movements, it's super smooth sounding, and these lines moving across is basically, the sound is just, I mean, the crossovers are just moving, you know, frantically. And as you heard, if you're doing that in Trash, you know, it just totally mess up your sound. It was moving at the, you know, the rate of that other one in Saturn. Yeah, these crossovers aren't that whatever's going on within Trash, like, you know, just Fabfilter have absolutely nailed in terms of their crossovers. So yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm not sponsored. You can tell that this is just me. You know, I'm using the demo version because I just wanted to like get my hands on it and like have a play around with it. I'm not sponsored by Fabfilter for making this video. You know, if they want to send me a version of the plugin, like, I'd be more than happy to take it. But what's probably going to happen is I'm going to have to fork out some cash and get this thing, because it looks really interesting, and I think I've only got like 20 days on the trial left. So yeah, go download it, try it out. Go support Fabfilter, because they make some really cool shit. Clearly, they make some really cool plugins. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Have a good one. Peace.